What's going on, wrestling fans? Welcome to the Tapped In Indy Wrestling Podcast. I'm Heath Milliken, joined always by Nick McDaniel. Nick, how are you this fine morning?
Dude, doing great, man. It was a pretty full weekend, doubleheader weekend for me as far as indie shows go. It's kind of it was our it was, I would say it was kind of our first full week back into the regular routine coming off the vacation. So, yeah, it's kind of back to normal now, I guess. So,
Yes, and even with the recording schedule and where we're recording from, so it is good to kind of be back in a routine, back in a schedule. Actually went to the gym this morning, so life is getting back to normal, and it's probably a good thing. A lot of y'all don't know, like before we record this, we talked for a while. We probably should have recorded all of that. That would have been a whole nother
yeah,
podcast for another time.
yeah.
Probably best that we didn't record it.
You know
Uh,
where we would have put it if we did though?
Patreon.com/tapped out pod is where you can get all of the behind the scenes. If you want to know where Nick went on vacation, you can see all those pictures. You get all the episodes a little early and then a lot of extra content. So that's at Patreon. Also, we need you to go to YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit that bell, get all the notifications so you know when we are dropping brand new content. And hey, for all you audio people, we got you covered. Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast. I don't know about you, Nick. When I'm listening to a podcast in the car, and I kind of freaked my girlfriend out the other day. I listened to it at 1.5 speed. She's like, "Man, this guy's talking really fast." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'm listening to this at 1.5 speed." So that's one of the big. I think you can do that with YouTube too, but I like to speed through all my podcasts. So no matter what format you're listening, we thank you for your support, and we're going to keep putting out great content for you, and always trying to evolve the show and make it better. Let's just jump right in. It was a busy weekend. Let's jump into this week's Indy Rewind, a full weekend of shows that started last Monday as you and I went to Southern Brewing Company there in Athens, Georgia for Wrestling at Southern for a really fun show. That was my first time going there.
Yeah, it was my second show up there, and one of the entertaining things that I experienced it, by the way, literally twice over this last week. Because I know we recorded right before we left to go to it, so
Mm-hmm.
it aired afterwards. So yeah, that total time. But one of the things I love to do is so a young lady joined us. It was one of my daughter's friends. She came over because she lives up in the Athens area, and she came to the show. I love to get perspectives from people that are not wrestling fans,
Yes.
that they're just kind of like, hey, I want to check it out and see what it is. And so to get her take on wrestling at Southern was pretty cool. And I'm going to go into the second part of that later in this episode. But the irony for her to tell, like, I told you this and you were like, what? And I'm not saying it negative about the wrestler, but,
Right.
she's like, her favorite wrestler at Wrestling at Southern was Michael Solar.
Yeah.
And she was like, he was funny. She was entertained by him. And I'm kind of like, because we get sometimes so caught up into the who can actually technically wrestle the best and like that's your favorite guy, whatever. And over the years, I've kind of swayed the other way. I'm coming back to going back to my inner child, I guess, to like who just entertains me the best. And it was really cool for me to see like her say that about him because I know he's working his tail off and
Yeah.
and so I wanted to make sure I said it on the air. I didn't want to tell him in person because I wanted him to hear it on the air that yeah, she said that Michael Solar was her favorite wrestler there. And it's just kind of but it is a very fun show if you're in the Athens area or not for that matter. When they run those shows on Mondays, it's just a cool environment to kind of check out. Like they are really experimenting and trying some character stuff at those shows, so you'll get to even see guys that trying something a little bit different there. So that's kind of what I enjoy about those shows.
Yes. One thing that I liked about it, and to kind of give props to Solar, is he was kind of in character. Like as soon as you got there, the wrestlers are kind of hanging out with everybody, and he was the same from the time we got there to through his match to afterwards. He was just the same person, his same character, or whatever. And I think if you're a new fan, you're kind of like, okay, I kind of get this guy. He wasn't kind of turning it on, turned it off. He was just the same. one thing I appreciate about this show is because of the setup, it really forces the workers to work on their, like, this is not the show where you're gonna try to see if you can hit a a 450 splash. This is character development, headlock, wrist lock, hip toss. It's a very, I mean, the matches are very, and I mean, though, this is not, there ain't nothing basic about a basic wrestling match. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
I realize the training, the speed, the technique. So I don't mean any disrespect by what I mean basic. But great character work, great interaction with the fans.
That's it.
And that is, and there was a group of fans who were there cheering on one of the heels. And I felt that the heel embraced that. Whereas a lot of times the heel will be like, hey, I don't need you. It was just a fun.
Yeah.
God forbid that there be a fun wrestling show that was over in 2 hours and I was home before midnight.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, it was the endorsement that you can give the show is the young lady that, was at that show then chose to come to another show, which we'll talk about later. So she came back, by the way, and brought her boyfriend to the second show that we will. And again, we'll talk about it in a minute because that's important to the notes of that show. But yeah, that it was enough that's to me, that's the biggest endorsement you can give a wrestling show. Hey, they came, they saw it, and they went to another one again.
Another thing that I appreciated, this card, and these are all Nightmare Factory kids, had a little bit of an 80s WWF flair because you had a guy who was doing a Spartan character. You had Pendragon, who he's doing, so you had the rock and roll guy. You had just kind of like the classic heel wearing the fur coat, that kind. So there was only one guy that I felt like was, I don't want to use the word generic, but he's trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I appreciated that the guys, that they had gear geared toward their persona.
Yeah.
The big match of the night, no pun intended, Luke Sampson and Warden in a title versus title match, the Wrestling at Southern title and the Nightmare Factory title. And it was Luke Sampson coming away as a double champion on Monday night.
Yeah, that was just two big dudes fight, and then we got a little close for that action as well. But again, it's interaction with the crowd, and makes it look. I embrace it. I'm like, look, glasses got all smudged up, and all that kind of stuff. But hey, look, it's part of the, if everybody's entertained with it, awesome. But Luke Sampson, of course, capturing both of those titles. Maybe down the road we're going to have more conversations about Luke Sampson and being now a double champion and what that means for down the road. But look, at the same time, tip your cap to Warden, who's just I think he's really good. I mean, for where he's at in his career and stuff like that, and there's lots of, I think he's still figuring out a couple things along the way with the character and stuff as well, and we can see that again because we'll bring him up later and on another show that I saw him twice, this week, and but yeah, tip your cap to him. But I think Luke Sampson wears BFD on his tights, and I'm kind of like, I also think he might put he's the RFD, like he's the real deal too. On top of that,
yeah, I totally agree with that. So. Make sure you're following Wrestling at Southern and Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling on Facebook and see when their next show is going to be. Highly, highly recommend. Another show that was during the week, Southern States Pro was in Atlanta on Thursday. Their big match was Kenway in his, I believe this was his first defense of that Southern States Pro title, three-way match against Alexander Lev and KJ Impala. And you want to talk about three young guys who are totally different. That's what I like about this. 3 guys, not just different in their style, their presentation, also different in kind of like how they're going about their careers. Um, but Kenway came away with the victory, and I'm excited to kind of see. Kenway's back in the area, I believe. I'm excited to see kind of where he goes from here.
I think going forward, I know he's the champion, so it's kind of not. I mean, I kind of rolled my eyes at myself when I thought it before I said it, but I think Kenway looks like he's probably potentially going to be the face of that brand for a while. I think him being a champion for a while there makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons.
I think that I'm excited because there was a guy who I thought should have been the Southern States Pro Champion who fell a little bit short, who had a title match coming up, who was out with an injury, and that's Bryce Cannon. And Southern States Pro, you schedule Kenway versus Bryce Cannon when Bryce Cannon's back. I'll be there. I'm coming. I'll cancel something to get to that match. So please make it happen. Hakeem Young took out Trevor Aon. AJ Black defeated Jade Bain. So some folks getting some opportunities here at Southern States Pro. Again, another name you need to beat, Dylan Lesend. That's a guy we've been talking about and who keeps getting opportunities. And actually, he and KJ Impala won tag team gold in Florida this weekend.
Yeah, not surprised. I mean, look, both of them are, and look, I know they're kind of getting together, I believe, there as well. And look, kudos to Hakeem Young. He's starting to put the work in again, and not that he stopped, but he's starting to show up in some places, and I think that's a good turnaround. I know, look, there was that little controversy a while back, but I think he's pushed through that. He's impressing people, doing all the right things, and he's kind of earning those spots at some places. So it's kudos to him for at least pushing through it and persevering it.
Action Wrestling was in Fayetteville, Georgia, Friday night. Don't have results there, but you can watch them at iwtv.com. The cast, the normal cast of characters are there at the Lion Creek Bus Barn. So Action running all sorts of different places. They're everywhere. We'll talk about them a little bit later. Also Friday night, you were there at Tannery Row Ale House in Buford, Georgia. Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. And talk about the VIP and the meet and greet setup they had.
So by the way, I cannot endorse the VIP any more than I can possibly try to. Great setup. You're up on the stage. You're at a table. It's the only section in the entire venue where you get full bar, full menu, like from the kitchen food. Everywhere else, it's kind of like, it's not concessions food, it's wing, but it is. It's kind of sort of. It's just not the full menu. But the value there is insane. When I was telling them, like, with what you paid for the VIP, you got your ticket, your seat. Let's call it that. There was an 8x10 of Billy Gunn. You got to go through the meet and greet with Billy Gunn first. They only allowed the VIPs to line up to start, to go through and get their pictures and the autographs or whatever. It was part of your package. Like, it was included. And then they let everybody go else, and those people had to pay. So I say, some of the coolest seats, in an environment you're ever going to have up on the stage, literally right up against the ring. Full menu, full bar, 8x10, the meet and greet. Like, dude, the value's insane. So if when those tickets go on sale, I know they're coming back soon. When they do come back, pay that money, and drop it and get your meet and greet and stuff. It's easily probably one of the best values you're going to get anywhere when it comes to pro wrestling, especially here, locally on the indie scene.
Yeah, I think we were talking about it, and for what you had to pay for a picture and an 8x10, if you had already bought a ticket, it was cheaper to do a VIP ticket.
Right. That's what we were saying. Yeah. So here's my thing. I think the seats are underpriced. Not even here. There you go. I think they're underpriced, to be honest with you.
we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But yeah, hey, Billy Gunn, he's not wrestling anywhere else in Georgia. Somebody else not wrestling anywhere else in Georgia. Satnam Singh, the 7 foot plus monster, and he beat two guys
Oh
Friday
yeah,
night.
handicap match. It's a very old school handicap. 2-on-1. But look, it was funny. We were making the joke. They're like, so somebody that was there with us asked me, "Is this a handicap match? It's 2-on-1." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm not really sure who has the handicap in this match." I mean, he's 7'4", 450. I mean, he's huge. To
Yeah.
see him in person, I was like, wow, like just massive. So very impressive. And by the way, you talk about like, hey, somebody that's going to draw a crowd and bring some tickets in. There was a large portion of that fan base that I was like, they're here to see Satnam Singh.
Yeah.
He drew a crowd in, and it was like section. I mean, it wasn't just like, like a couple. It was a big chunk. So, again, it's because he's not wrestling anywhere else in Georgia, as far as I know. If I'm wrong, tappedoutpod@gmail.com. Put me in my place and correct me, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. Vari Morales defeated Shoot Taylor in a match. I hope somebody taped. You said that one was really good. Parker Lee and Bobby Fish took on Jimmy Wild and Aaron Solo. That's another thing. Bobby Fish double shotting in Georgia this weekend. The main event, QT Marshall, Billy Gunn, and Superman, local guy, defeated Warden Drago and Trevor Blackwell. And that's the thing. It's like these turnbuckle shows very much the house show feel, but you never know what you're going to get. You're always going to get your money's worth.
That what you just said, the reason you get your money's worth is like, here I am, like, because we were again talking before we recorded, and I'm like, Vari Morales and Shoot Taylor. Look, we shared a ton of love for Vari last week, and here we go in back to back weeks. He goes out there, and him and Shoot Taylor just crushed it. Shoot Taylor deceptively good. Like, I think a lot of people are like, okay, he's working on some character stuff. He is. And by the way, I love the new character. I do. But there's still some things to tweak. I'm sure he probably feels that way. But him and Vari go out there and just absolutely, if it wasn't a home run, it was a triple. I mean, it was really good. And the reason why I'm saying that is you had Bobby Fish and Aaron Solo on opposite sides of the ring with two younger guys. Oh, by the way, who can both deliver, because we, Parker Lee and then Jimmy Wild, they're just, super talented. And I'm getting here, I promise. Brady Booker and Brick, they come out and they wrestle Solar and Pendragon, who we've already sung the praises of Solar, right?
Right.
They go out there. The thing that we're getting at is match by match by match, they're delivering. There's like really super talented people in each match. So even if it is, because somebody was like, oh, it's a lot of, this guy's a trainee or he's a Nightmare Factory guy. Yeah, but he's in there with and it's, and it's somebody who's elevating them and making them better. And I think that is a very solid thing that's missing in some places where it's the same over and over and over. We're getting guys who are they're learning.
The difference, you coined the phrase, better than, worse than, different than. One thing different with Turnbuckle. They are not, because they're not booking the really long angles and stories, they are booking. Their intention is get these guys better. Mm-hmm. Like we are minor leagues they embrace that. We are minor leagues to get people up. Like, I'm sure if QT Marshall, if Brady Booker's still wrestling for Turnbuckle in 3 years, QT's going to be like, well, I kind of blew it with that guy. They are booking these people, trying to get them up the ladder, get them opportunities.
No, I agree. You froze there, so I'm going to cover it until you come back here. But yeah, 1,000%. They're booking. It's you're gonna you're gonna get Drago. He's gonna be somewhere. Blackwell. Again, Jimmy Wild, Parker Lee, on and on and on. Right? It's like all these different ones. Sorry about that. You froze for a second, so I just jumped in.
Sorry about that.
No, you're okay. And so and it was funny what you said was exactly. This is kind of why I knew we'd eventually get there. The young lady that came to the Wrestling at Southern show, she came Friday and brought her boyfriend, And he leaned over to me and he goes, these guys are pretty good. Is this like kind of like the minor? He literally said what you said. Is this kind of like the minor leagues for like, WWE or, AEW? So he actually knew who AEW was. So I was being able to have conversations of like, hey, QT Marshall, he's employed by AEW. Satnam Singh's employed by Billy Gunn's and he's like, oh yeah. Those type of things. And I'm like, I could actually point out like this guy was in NXT, this guy, so he could put all those pieces together, and they grasp it, because even them, they were like, I said, so you're going to come back to another show? Oh, absolutely. Athens and here we'll probably do both. And that's kind of what I was trying to do to get them to like, oh, this is cool. Let's go do this. And even, here's the funny thing is, I don't know if I told you this. My daughter did show up. We had dinner beforehand, and little man, my grandson, he's 1. He made it, and he lasted about 2 minutes. And once all the racket started and the banging started, because of all things, Luke Sampson was in the first match.
Yeah.
So when all the banging started happening, I think he was ready to go. He got a little jittery, so they left. But, her friend and her boyfriend stayed, and that, like I said, had a spectacular time. So here we are for bringing people to Turnbuckle shows, you and me. We're a perfect 2-0, right? Like
that's right.
They're back on board to coming, and that's the strength of that promotion is repeat business. Get them, keep coming back. And by the way, look, the stuff like I said, I just think they have such an advantage, and we may get to that later. So, Turnbuckle is definitely one that I tell you to put your money on, whether it's Athens or Norcross or or it's down here in Buford, anywhere. If you see them, follow them on social media, because they are hitting so many places. You really got to give them a follow to see where their next show is, to make sure you get out and check them out. So
yeah, they're filling up our calendar just by themselves.
Yeah.
SCA, they were there at the Royston Dome in Royston Friday night. They're there every Friday night. The beat rolls on, so just make sure you're giving them a follow. And again, that's a different kind of show, different kind of feel. That's the kind of show you get there on the front row, you yell at somebody, and they're yell back at you. So go check out Squared Circle Action Wrestling. Then Saturday night, down in Savannah, Coastal Empire had a really big show. You had maybe a little bit of controversy. You had Exotic Youth defeating Probable Cause. They won the Tag Turmoil titles. And then Simon Sermon and Chip Schuyler came out, demanded a title shot, got it in a no DQ match. And so they weren't even listed, but it's Chip Schuyler and Simon Sermon walking away with the Tag Turmoil titles there on Saturday night.
Rarely does one get one over. I was being very specific of my words. Get one over on Exotic Youth, because they can be as devious as anybody. But Simon Sermon, he's one of those veterans, man. That they don't do those things, man. When somebody challenges you like that, do it on your terms, not their terms, because sometimes when you make rash decisions, you end up making a mistake just like that, and you've got a loss.
Yes. Hakeem Young, we talked about him earlier. Got a win over Rob Killjoy. That's a pretty big deal. That's one we talked about. That'll be on YouTube. And then the big one, Randall Reno dropping that Coastal Empire title to CT Keys, who now, in 2 of the promotions we cover, CT Keys is the man.
We talked about it last week. I said if I was a betting man, you'd be hard-pressed to get me to bet against CT Keys. And Randall Reno III found out why that is the case, because CT Keys is a stud. And, there was not too long ago, I remember me, arguing into my microphone about why he wasn't booked more places. And I think the reason might have been because when he gets booked more places, he starts collecting more titles. And there were probably some guys probably making the case not to bring him in because things like this happen. And somebody like Randall Reno's dropping it, literally like just rolling through the door. CT Keys is showing him what a stud athlete he is and why he's, he's a champion pretty much, whenever and wherever he wants.
CT Keys is not an opening match guy. anymore. He's a top of the card player. Coastal Empire returns August 31st, featuring a rematch with CT Keys and Randall Reno III, and then also in singles action, Zach Mosley, and Simon Sermon
Yeah.
going to try to settle. I don't know if they settle the score entirely, but they're gonna get some frustrations out.
Yeah. And hopefully, by the way, I want to throw in the Flying Fro was out of action, injured foot. We wish him well, and hopefully he's back pretty soon. I don't know that he'll be back by that show, but hopefully, potentially, maybe we'll see. But heal up and be back, because I know the kid was just getting on. He was catching fire, and he was on. He was on a roll. So hopefully he bounces back pretty quick from that. So.
Yes. Also, Saturday night, Anarchy Wrestling. They're at the Royston Dome. This is their second show in their return. A few days before this show, Aaron Stevens, aka Damian Sandown, Thomas Latimer from the NWA were supposed to be doing a seminar. It was announced a few days before. They were pulled from that. So Sal Rinauro and Bobby Fish, again, Bobby Fish in the town for the weekend.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
This is gonna be a good one, right?
Okay.
If I'm a wrestler, and this is no respect to those two original guys, I actually think I probably would have been happier with the seminar that I got with Sal Rinauro and Bobby Fish. Okay, is it maybe depending on what you were? Because here's the thing, I was gonna say something. I'm like, no, I'm still gonna stand, but I'm gonna stand on what I said. Because here's the thing, I want character work, Sal. I put Sal's character work up against either one of those two guys. Well, Sandow was in the WWE. Okay, yeah, he got. I mean, and I don't mean this like he didn't earn it. Timing's everything, and sometimes things happen or whatever. So, yeah, but I would still put the character work of Sal Rinauro up against either one of them. And then when it comes to the in-ring ability, I put both of those guys up against. You know what I mean? I'm like, so I don't know that had I signed up for the other seminar and you told me it changed, I would have been like, awesome. I don't think I'd have been disappointed for sure.
Yeah, I don't even know how I feel about seminars anymore, but I think wrestlers ought to be continually learning as much as they can. I think we can say there's more to this story. That we'll report on as we get more on it. And then Sal Rinauro and Bobby Fish had a match that you very much enjoyed on the card Saturday night.
So it was look. Learn how to read the room sometimes is probably a good thing. This is no disrespect to the crowd or anything like that. It's like, but they went out there and gave a crowd. I think they were like. I was entertained. That's all I'm going to say. I'll leave it at that. I know a lot of people didn't enjoy this match as much as I did, but I also we discussed it at Wrestling at Southern. We've discussed it at Turnbuckle. We've discussed promotions where the wrestlers interact with a crowd. To me, can be more fun. It would have jumped back all the way to the beginning of the show. Something that was happening at Wrestling at Southern, I found myself itching that is this something Nick should start doing at wrestling shows? I ended up deciding no, because I don't need to be part of the show, for one. Mm-hmm. But that Trev Chirps thing at Wrestling at Southern, where the guys are like, they're yelling at the baseball call out things. So if you don't follow Trev Chirps on Instagram or on Twitter, you should, because it's super funny. He does heckles baseball players or whatever. And I thought there was a couple moments that I'm like, it only works in small crowd venues. It doesn't work when there's 300-400 people in the building and it's a lot. None of that works. But it was working at Wrestling at Southern, and it was there were moments it was quiet that I was like, oh, I should do that too. Right. I say all that because that's that interaction between the crowd. Like the guys at the Wrestling at Southern would say it, and then they would, the wrestlers would chirp back at them, and they were arguing and interacting, whatever. And some people could say, oh, the fans are hijacking the show. I get it. I just didn't feel that way in that environment. It didn't feel that way. Because it wasn't it wasn't a constant barrage of it. It was like they would do one and it would sit a while and they would do one. They was almost like picking their spots. Yes. Now to come back to the Anarchy thing, in pauses, Bobby Fish interacting. There was a row of, and I'm assuming, by the way, I'm really assuming a huge chunk here. I thought it was probably. I did not realize, by the way, there's a college literally like you drive right through it, coming to the Royston Dome. I felt like it was a frat house or something at the college that came. It was about, I think it was like 15.
They're one of our big rivals.
Oh,
Emmanuel
are they?
College. Yeah. They're one of our big rivals.
So and that's what I thought it was. But so for them because they were the absolute loudest 14, 15 people in the building. They were as rowdy as they get. And Sal Renaro and Bobby Fish took advantage of that. A heel Bobby Fish to start the match. Interacting with them literally was pulling the noise from them. Because there are other matches that suffered from it that was not the case. And right. I think it showed the experience of those two to go like, look, if we go out there and we try to do a wrestling match, like just a hard, technical wrestling match, we're probably going to get crickets.
Right.
So let's go have some fun. And that's what worked. That's why I like the match probably more than most.
Yes. That is definitely one. I think Anarchy's on IWTV as well. That's one I'll be checking out. Another one I want to check out, Fluffman making his Anarchy debut, I believe, and also Stevie Ray Frost, who's a regular at SCA but got an opportunity with Anarchy. You had Nick Halen and Brian Blaze going at it, and it ended up Alexander Lev got involved in that.
Yeah, so they did this promo at the beginning, and again, some cool things where if you're going to do it, let's do it as a promo to kind of explain it and let me, hear what's going on. Essentially, Nick Halen comes out because The Undeniable came out first. He comes out and essentially like, look, he's not dumb. He knows what's going to happen later. He just essentially challenges him to a 2-on-1. That's what we're going to get at the end of the night. The main event rolls. He does come out, but of course, Alexander Lev surprisingly makes the save. By the way, kudos. I'm gonna put it over in a positive way here. So they have a match and there's a surprise. I don't call it surprise. Lev and Halen win, but they go out of their way for Lev to explain why the heel Alexander Lev would be the one to help Nick Halen. He comes out and explains. Nick Halen is one of the major reasons. He's been training him. Nick Halen's a major reason he's been signed by the NWA, and he knows that. And he was not going to stand back and let you know what I mean? So, like, hey, you gave me the background. You gave me, and this is going to be very, very important, by the way, folks. He explained it to me so I didn't have to figure out the whys, nor did I have to be so inside baseball to know that's what was going on.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, kudos. Billy Buck took on Jeter and Kenway in a 3-way match, and the big man Jeter with a win. Jacob Ashworth, his first defense of the Georgia Heritage title at Anarchy, went to a 10-minute draw with Scott Mason. That's a sentence I didn't think I'd ever say.
Scott Mason's proven he ain't overrated, I guess.
Right. I think that's I guess I did, I mean, I know those guys, have history or whatever, but most of the time either one of those guys will fight you to the death. So the fact that they had a 10-minute draw kind of surprises me. And then Murder One and Joe Black defeated the Northside Heroes in a tag team title defense in a match that you said was surprisingly good.
Surprisingly is maybe like I shouldn't be the right way, but here's the thing that was surprising about it. Northside Heroes come out and they're playing babyface. Murder and Joe, look, at this point they're so cool for school at this point that they're cheered anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and that was by the way, that was the only thing about this card where I was kind of like, because the fans were behind Scott Mason and they were behind Jacob Ashworth. I don't know that they wanted to see either one of them lose, so they didn't get the reaction they probably wanted. Yeah, because nobody wanted to see either one of them lose. By the time, look, the crowd came, like Northside's kind of debuting, so they were kind of introducing themselves. And I always tell people, like, when you see them, you're kind of like, oh, two little dudes, they're about to get their tails handed to them by Murder and Joe. Then they go in there and they were wrestling and showing like, no, we can wrestle. And then everybody's like, oh. So then they started getting behind them too. So now we are in the same boat of, okay, we got two teams we like. Who do we want to win? You know, those are kind of, and that's why I'm more old school. Like, hey, it happens. I get it. But that's why I like clear defined bad guy, clear defined good guy. You know, and look, Murder and Joe are probably supposed to be clear. You know, they're supposed to be hated. They're just not. Yeah. They're just not. Most places they go these days, they're just not. So that's a hard. It's always ice skating uphill at times. So that's kind of, you know. But look, the match was very good. I mean, shocking. You know, that wasn't surprising that the match actually was good. It was just the scenario that it played out was a little surprising.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have more news on Anarchy moving forward. Definitely some developments there that we've got our eye on, and obviously, fans, you'll be the first to know, especially our Patreon members. Deep South was in Atlanta, New Realm Brewing. This one headlined by Skrilla defending that Deep South title that he's held for a very long time against Jacob Johnson in and I don't know how you want to talk about this. We talked about it last week, a barbed wire steel cage. We've seen video. It appeared to have been a steel cage with a one-piece barbed wire. Yeah. So it was not a barbed wire steel cage. Anyway, not to take away from the main story, and that is Jacob Johnson is your new Deep South Wrestling heavyweight champion.
So what a, you know, and look, we did see some video, and I watched it to try to, you know, keep up on it and everything. And kudos to Jacob Johnson for, you know, for ending a heck of a run. Let's pause there to give Skrilla his flowers.
Yes.
For, you know, one heck of a run as the Deep South champion. Clearly he was the guy there for a very, very long time. And look, to be that guy, let me put this in perspective. To be that guy, he had the respect and the love from, you know, Nick Patrick, Joe Hamilton Jr. to be the guy. I know, you know, Bischoff dropped through and he, you know, kind of had some great words about him as well. So it's kind of one of those things. I'm like, look, it wasn't like he wasn't just randomly picked by a guy. He was picked by a guy who's been around the business for a very long time, and he made him, you know, he was the guy for a very long run. So kudos and the tip of the cap to, you know, that run that he had there. Kudos to Jacob Johnson for ending that and becoming the new guy. Question becomes now, what do we always say? What's next? And then what? So now what is set for Skrilla? Where does he go from here? This could be a crucial moment for Skrilla. Where does he go, and where does, you know, that's kind of, I'm eager to see what happens, you know, for the rest of this year for your reigning, defending, you know, wrestler of the year. Like, what's next? So I'm excited to see what's next for him.
I think this gives him, how do I say this and have it make sense? Sometimes when you are the champion, which is a good thing. It's a good thing to be the champion. Let me clarify that. But sometimes when you're the champion, it kind of pigeonholes you into one thing, where if you're not the champion, there's a lot more options in front of you. And so I'm interested to see if Skrilla is a guy in Deep South that doesn't need the belt anymore to really still be the face and the guy in that company. Obviously, like you said, Nick Patrick's got all the belief in him in the world. And so Deep South just keeps on going. Georgia Championship Wrestling there in Buckhead, Georgia. D-Money retaining that Brass Knuckles Championship against Hold My Beer Hansen. You had the TV title was on the line as Pat Roach defeated Jerry Nelms to retain that title. The heavyweight title, though, ended in a no contest. Terry Lawler and Big Andy, Dirt Road Dynasty got involved. And
what's worse, man, they cost us. That's title versus title. Those two were going title versus title. And look, and by the way, sometimes you kind of, the writing's on the wall sometimes. Hey, not at Wrestling at Southern on Monday, right? We actually saw a definitive winner, and we got a unified champion. So so Andy and Terry, title versus title. Somebody needs to put the beat down on Dirt Road Dynasty for causing us not to get a clear defined winner there. By the way, I know where that's going to start at. When that's going to happen, right? When are we going to see that payback?
August 31st. Big Andy and Terry Lawler getting their hands on Dirt Road Dynasty, so they're not wasting any time in making that. And what is that? That is good, logical booking.
Yep. Like step A leads to step B, and we'll see kind of where C is from there. But yeah, kudos to them. They're on a regular, like I said, August 31st. As soon as I saw that, boom, put it on the calendar, got it marked down, and so they just keep doing what they do, drawing a consistent. I think that's their wheelhouse now. At least they're consistent and they're drawing that regular, steady house, and they're kind of in their wheelhouse now.
Mucha Lucha ran over the weekend. Don't have results from there. Sorry about that. That is one. Got to get their next date. Got to get that on the calendar. We got to head out to a Mucha Lucha show.
Yeah, we've done some. It's here's the problem. Like Sundays have always been a challenge for me to do any show, much less Mucha Lucha is an experience. It's not an indie show. It's way above. And I, with all due respect to any indie promotion that we go to, it is heads and shoulders above anything else that you're going to experience.
Right.
Because we're talking street tacos and food and beer and shots if you want them. You're going to go in there and there's going to be anywhere from 800 to 1,500 people. I mean, it's crazy. Like 1,000 is like a normal crowd for them. So it's a massive crowd. But I know a lot of people try to push back a little bit, like, because by the way, it is, when I say it's all in Spanish, it's pretty much all in Spanish. When the shows we've went to, they will, kudos and tip your cap. Ricardo will speak like, hey, he just wants to welcome the English speaking fans there. He'll talk for a second and then that's it. Like it's after that, it's boop, it's right back to the Spanish. That's their crowd, dude. And I tell people, like, look, the posters design, he has developed, one of our friend of the show, Gary Lamb, talks about community and like that's his strength of what he does in his promotion of all of his events. Look at what Ricardo does at Mucha Lucha. That is 1,000% what he does. He taps in and he's built this community where these shows are hours. They're long. And, and look, it's something we sit there and maybe complaining, and I'm not saying complaining about it, but it's like it's a long event. I've actually had to leave them before. Like I had to leave before the main event for one show because I had to be somewhere. But his fans don't care. Right. They're there. They're letting their hair down and they're having a great time and enjoying all of the fun. And it's 1,000% an event. And what's crazy, though, is I always tell somebody, and I talked to you about this a little bit before we recorded, there are a number of Georgia wrestlers that are on that show. Like, Alberto El Patron was on the show. Muertes, I always forget the Mil Muertes. He's bringing in, like, Lince Dorado was on the show. Like, he's bringing he's bringing in, like, the big gun names. But there's also guys that, like, they're a guy, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to, so I'm not going to say who they are.
Yeah.
But there are, like, multiple guys there that, like, we watch on a regular basis. They're under a mask there. They're working a completely, totally different character at that event. And I'm like, dude, you should really go check them out because maybe they'll let me know so the next time they're in town I can say, like, this is who this is. I just don't want to say this is who this is if they don't want it known. And they you talk about an opportunity. Think about this. You could be working 200 people as a specific character on a Saturday night, but on Sunday, you go work in front of 1,000 people under a mask and get to work a completely different character.
Right.
I'm like, dude, there are probably times I'm like, dude, I would take the other character if it's working, and try it somewhere else too. But so kudos for those guys. It's an amazing opportunity for those men and women that do that work, there as well.
So anyway, it was a very busy week. However, let's talk about making the drives. This weekend, a little lighter schedule. Important shows, but not as many. Friday night, SCA is going to be back there in Royston, Georgia. Saturday down in Tifton, Georgia. Kraken Pro Wrestling is going to be there. All-Star Special is going to be there. The Business Brother Azrael many, many more. You can check them out on Facebook. No matches announced yet, but I'm sure they'll be announcing some this week. Also, Saturday night, Monroe, Georgia, Southern Fried Championship Wrestling. Judias making his return, his first return since Shindig. Billy Buck, and Najasism for that Classics title. Another rematch. Crystal Rose came out at the last show and challenged Deity for that women's title. We're finally going to get that rematch. Neil Koloff, who attacked Jacob Ashworth at the last show, is going to be taking on Ashworth. Lots of great matches. Here's a question we had. Not really sure how to ask this question. Back in May, the Approved won the tag team titles. May 4th, May 18th, somewhere in there. The month of May.
4th, May 4th, yeah.
They have not defended those titles since then. There's been at least
question mark, right?
Question mark.
Yeah.
If we're wrong, tapoutpod@gmail.com.
If we don't, look, I'm going to find out Saturday. If we were wrong, I'll know Saturday.
Here's a question. We know Nick Halen had his issues with David Manders. We know other things are happening. Is that due to maneuvering by the Approved? Have the Approved gotten involved in other things? 6-man matches, 8-man matches, the feud with Manders, to get out of defending those titles?
It's a possibility. We had a conversation last week on the national show, Myron and I did, about Logan Paul's had 2 defenses since he's been the United States champion.
Wow.
It's not a quote we would typically say on this particular show, but Logan Paul said you can't get an STD if you haven't been tested. So the question is the Approved, like you said, have they figured it out of like, we can't lose our tag team titles if we don't ever have to defend them because we've always were tangled up in something else? That's a question.
Very, very interesting.
That is probably one of the most Adrian Hawkins moves I've ever heard of, and he's not even part. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, Southern Fried is going to be there in Monroe. Make sure you go check them out. Then Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling is going to be back in Athens, Georgia. This time at Callie and Tito's. Dude, they are doing the loop. Announced for this show. QT Marshall is going to be there. Robin Renegade from AEW and Ring of Honor. The Dream Killer, Luke Sampson, Brady Booker, and many, many more. The typical stars of Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling.
But the $1 million thing, what? That's who they've announced. We don't know that is a Billy Gunn, is a Glacier, is, blah, 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 blah. I'm keeping a close eye on them because I just always am like, dude, I'm just amazed at who rolls through there, and you just never. I mean, Satnam Singh wrestled the last time when they were at Callie and Tito's last time. He was there and wrestled, and I'm like, so I've already committed. I think I've got to go. I've missed one, maybe 2. I can't remember. Southern Fried show, so I'm committed. I'm gonna get back to Southern Fried this Saturday and see that show for sure. So
I will. My calendar is open, so I'm looking at either one of those shows, and we'll see what. We'll see what comes of that. Let's move on. Want to do something a little bit different here, but let's move on to this week's Power 5. Here's what I want to do in the time we have left, TV time remaining. I wanted to look at the very first Power 5 we did on our first episode back February 15th of this year. I wanted to look at that initial Power 5 and then give the current Power 5 and see what changes have happened. So here was the initial Power 5. I'll start with number 5. Number 5 was Gary Lamb. Number 4, the Grapplers. Number 3, Matt Griffin. Number 2, Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. Number 1, Bryce Cannon. I feel pretty strongly looking back at that time that was a pretty solid Power 5 at the time.
Oh, agreed. Yeah. Especially because was that pre-injury? That was pre-injury, yeah. So that would have made sense, yeah. So Bryce being at the top would have made sense, yep.
Bryce Cannon was getting a lot of love. He still gets a lot of love on the show. So let's see how much things have changed with our current Power Five. What is this? 7 months later, 6 months later. I can't do math. You know what our number 5 is? Number 5 is others receiving votes. I would say, would you say, when we first started the Power Five, we had to narrow it down. And this time, we both felt like there really wasn't someone standing out deserving of that 5th spot.
Yeah, it was a struggle.
There are several promotions who have kind of taken the summer off. They've run a lighter schedule, and we feel like that's hurt them, at least in our. If you haven't run a show, you can't be Power Five.
Momentum is a hard thing to have when you're not there. It's out of sight, out of mind. That's a hard thing. And look, do we think those promotions were in our brains that we were thinking about can pick up? Well, let's be honest. I'm going to catch a lot of grief for this. We were like, look, Southern Honor took the entire month of July off. Now, I think out of the promotions that we talked about that maybe lost a little momentum, they have the leg up on gaining it back super quick, because when they come back out of the gate in August, it's Rumblejack, which is one of the top, one of the most anticipated shows of the year. Because some people asked me, I made a joke one year about it, and I don't know that it was a joke. I might actually put Rumblejack over like the anniversary show some years. Yeah. Like it's as far as like, because here's why, by the way, I can explain myself pretty simple. There are many years where I look forward to the Royal Rumble more than I do WrestleMania. It's just because of what they can do. There's the storytelling of a Rumble and things like that. That's kind of why. So they basically, as they take their break, WrestleMania season a lot of times has that 6-week gap going from the pay-per-view before the Mania. Very similar situation. They take that break, but you're not doing a weekly TV show to keep the momentum going. But when I think they can come out of their break with their foot on the gas, and they immediately are back into the mix, as one of the top players. But 6 weeks or so can hurt you.
Here's the challenge for Southern Honor. They've had this break. They have to hit a grand slam with Rumblejack. I'm talking about Rumblejack from start to finish. When you've had this much of a break and you've had this much time to plan it, it's got to be on point. It's got to hit on. You cannot lay an egg at any part, on any part of that card. Okay. And in any part of that match, it's got to be the best it's ever been.
Yeah, no pressure, Dylan.
No pressure. And there were other promotions, and I think I want to do a Patreon thing with this. I don't want to get.
That's a Patreon conversation. Let's keep it up ahead.
Well, there were other promotions I wanted to put in there, but there were reasons I couldn't. So I'll talk about that on Patreon. Here's number 4. So nobody really deserved number 5. Number 4, Zach Mosley. Zach Mosley has taken over Coastal Empire and has done some good things with them. Can he sustain it long term, for months, for years? Don't know. We're gonna find out. Zach Mosley. We talked a few weeks ago about getting back to NAWA Classic, where he and Skrilla drew a good crowd and had a great match. Wherever Zach Mosley is booked, whether it be singles or tag team, he's booked as a top talent, and that's why he's right here. He's branched out. He's not lost a step since the injury to Bryce Cannon. He and Pep have kept things up. And so I think he's number 4 in my Power 5.
And I will briefly pull the curtain back and say, like, hey, I sent him. I'm really proud of these. We talked about wrestlers taking matters into their own hands at times, taking these promotions, starting promotions, whatever, getting involved. I'm really happy for those guys. And, and I shot him a message and said that. like look, hey, it's cool that you guys are like doing this, because I think a couple of reasons why. It's not wrestlers dependent on just wrestling promoters, and that's not a negative connotation of the wrestling promoter. That's just me saying, hey, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And also, by the way, wrestlers preparing for life after wrestling. Like,
That's right.
what's another thing I can do? What's another thing I can, if you, so anyway, but that's why I agree with him being on the list for sure.
Number 3, they weren't even a thing in February. Bullpen Championship Wrestling. They have come out of the gates. They have drawn big crowds. Can they sustain it long term? Don't know. But so far, they've definitely put their name on the map, and they have definitely taken Georgia wrestling by storm so far.
Are they the hot new thing? That's a question mark. Like tappedoutpod@gmail.com. Is that where they are? That they're come ramping? Look, promotions come in, and I know a lot of people are like, hey, they come out of the gate strong, and they, will they last or whatever. We know there's some interest in some things that could be big for them. This is the Patreon thing, because I have a stance on it that it's not popular at all. And it's not that I'm hiding it. I just don't want to, they put some people in a bad light. I think they're strong. They earned their position here. They're bringing it, like they got some contacts as well. They're bringing in some legacy meet and greet talents and things as well. But they earned this spot because they're taking wrestlers. They're getting wrestlers that are, and bringing them in that are usually locked up at other places. And guys are choosing. This is huge. When guys are choosing to go work there, that's a strong plus for the promotion. So time will tell, but at this current moment, they earned their spot where they sit.
Yeah, and they definitely have, with Bull Buchanan, they definitely have the connections. We'll see if they have the infrastructure, but everything's in place for them to have a long run and to be a player in Georgia wrestling and beyond. Number 2, this guy, I think, has been in every Power 5 we've done this year, and he still remains. Number 2, Matt Griffin. Action Wrestling, SCI, boom. They just keep doing what they do. They keep putting on great shows, entertaining their fans, building their fan base, and giving wrestlers and workers a place to perform that's getting national exposure through IWTV.
And they're starting, it's going to become a theme for 1 and 2 here. They're also kind of developing their own loop where they're at multiple places, multiple venues. And so it's like you said, you can create a loyal pool, or you can just give more opportunities to more guys, which is kind of what they do. If you notice, there are similar faces on some of the cards, yes, but I also try to stress to people, like, your line, the line Bus Barn, and if I messed that up, I apologize.
Mm-hmm.
But that show is always a little bit different than the one that they run, down there in Tyrone. And it's like, and then, we're going to run. I'm eager to see, because, the weather and everything stopped the DOS barbecue show. What's that show look like? Is it going to be a different roster than, and because Matt Griffin, one of his strengths is seeing talent, recognizing it, and like giving guys opportunities. I think that's always been one of their strengths. And I think that's something I'm hoping we see, like, from a national scale. Brain, I say, like, does Tyrone become, like, that's the A show, and then you've got a B and a C show spread over, but it's not necessarily in a way of the levels they look at them, but you're going to have a different roster that kind of bounces around, and they can give. I think there's really an opportunity for guys to get a chance to become. If you're noticed at the DOS barbecue show, then he moves you over to, you can get a little more work on the Bus Barn show, and then that earns you the shot. Eventually, you're over with the champions and stuff at Tyrone. So
that makes a ton of sense. And then number 1 is Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. They have just come back this year better than ever. They're running quality shows in multiple locations, giving people opportunities, bringing in Hall of Famers. the show we went to in Jefferson was top notch production, things we haven't seen in Georgia, in a Georgia wrestling show. To kind of piggyback on what we just were saying about action, is if you're a Georgia promotion and you run a limited amount of shows, whether that's even once a month now or bi-monthly, and Action and Turnbuckle are running 2 to 3, even more shows per month now, what are you going to do to keep up with that? Like, what are you? I mean, oh man, it's so hard to run shows. Man, Turnbuckle, they're running all the time, and they've really raised the bar. And again, they've done that. They've raised the bar by not caring about the bar. They don't care about Georgia wrestling. They're just here to do their thing, and they're doing it quite well.
Yeah, and it's look, that money is for the Dusty Foundation, so there's a lot of good coming out of that stuff too. A little bit different type of an ideal. They're not, chasing the dollar per se, but the things they offer. That's like I said, the things that they have to offer. That, by the way, here's the strength. And by the way, I think when you look across the state, we see promotions that are geared. That's a casual fan show. That's more of a diehard indie wrestling fan show. That's on, you can kind of point those things. But a promotion that can sit there and cater to all needs, and there's multiples that do it, by the way. But then it's like, okay, yeah, this promotion does it, but they run once a month. Okay, well, they run 3. I pointed out to you when I was at the Turnbuckle show, there was a kid's birthday party there. Yeah. There were like 10-year-olds or something there. And they, to me, were the highlight of the show. They lined that wall up. They were banging on that wall. They were streaming or whatever. And I'm like, so I think I texted you, and I may have said, by the way, this is a compliment if anybody from Turnbuckle's listening. This might be, what was it? How did I say it? Like, this might be the most casual of casual fan shows I've ever been to.
Yeah.
Nobody was sitting there going, they did, by the way, they weren't even doing the one fall.
Right.
thing. Nope. The fans were like, who we got? And the music was hit, and they were in, and they were all like, woo. I ran into at Turnbuckle, somebody who works with my wife at the school. Yeah, I was like, and she was like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I do a podcast. Like, she was like, and I had the shirt on, and it kind of went across. And I was like, why are you here is the bigger question. And she was like, oh, he's really into wrestling. It was her significant other, husband, I think so, yeah. And I was like, oh, really? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. By the way, well, I won't say that on there. I didn't even recognize the guy. I went to high school with him. Didn't even recognize him. But yeah, no, it was just weird. Like, it was just the most there was clearly a base there to see Satnam Singh. There was a crowd there to see, the Superman guy that was in the main event with QT and Billy Gunn. So it was just kind of like, this could be the most casual crowd I think I've ever seen at an indie show. And if you can do that, by the way, because here's the magic. This is why they're number 1. If they can draw that crowd and keep them, and then people find out they're bringing, like, the indie darlings and the people that, by the way, old school fans, like, a lot of people were there like, oh, Billy Gunn. The friend of my daughter's boyfriend that was there, he literally, like, because he's so detached kind of from wrestling in the sense, as the show, Billy Gunn's out there for a minute doing the meet, before the meet and greet, he finally turns him, he goes, is that the guy from DX? And I'm like, yes, it is. And he's like, oh, wow. The light bulb went off. So I think when the nostalgia, they got guys who can just go in there and tear it up in the ring. And then just the casualist, because of the presentation of the show, I don't have to come every month to keep up.
Mm-hmm. What does it say? I think we're in a good season of Georgia wrestling because I don't think there are any gatekeepers in Georgia wrestling anymore. Like, I think there's been this feeling or this sense of you got to get over with certain people to get anywhere in Georgia. And Turnbuckle and others have just come in. Like, when was the last time a promotion started and they just did their thing? They didn't care. They didn't cater to quote unquote the gatekeepers. They didn't cater to a certain audience. They just kind of did their thing and were trying to win new fans and trying to just do something fresh.
And to sorry, caught myself. I was like, yeah, I can't have that conversation on the air. Like to say, like, it's not that they don't care about the parties that you know, the other parties involved. Like they do. I know that personally. I do know they do.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, we're not trying to do this. We're not trying to do, like, there's no accusations of like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. It's like, look, we're just running our show. We're doing our thing, and we're going to bring in this guy. We're not stealing this guy from you. We're not trying to, listen, this is a thing out there apparently. Like, hey, don't work that show, work our show instead, or don't do that. Or my favorite, you know, if you work for them, you're not going to work for me. I'm like, okay, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But that's kind of apparently still a thing as well. I hear those conversations too. We could just ramble on about they have upset the apple cart for sure, and kind of turned a lot of things on its ear, because the problem is they have such of their stuff is in house. There is no relying on not much of anything else. Now, all that being said about the Power Five, like that is our, you know, look, turnbuckle number one. There, let's say that. So we had, there's your period on the Power Five. But that doesn't mean like look. It always takes, and it's, you know, Southern Fried comes out of Shindig. It takes them a show or two, and then they get the new stories are off to the races. Mm-hmm. Southern Honor's going to shoot out of the gate with Rumblejack, and then they're off to the races, heading to their anniversary show. Like, we're not saying that nobody's like with it. That 5 was the problem, was there was so much right there at 5 that, you know, here's in our notes. I typed it in here, and it's the only way I can say it. Jockeying continues. And with some of the recent events that we know about, it's wide open right now. I think the obstacle becomes, because of the actions, the turnbuckles, and, you know, some of these newer and whatever, the challenge and the gauntlet gets thrown down about, you got to be different. You just have to be. If all the promotions, like, you remember there was a time where we talked about the posters all look the same. By the way, I haven't even done it yet. Kudos to Disruptor. They run a poster and a show that's not like, they're not like anybody else. I mean, look, I know I'm biased on that one as well, but guess what? That's a fact. When you look at their card, it is not a card that you see everywhere else. I love guys getting opportunities to work in multiple places. At the same time, how about some of those multiple places? How about those places being in Tennessee or the Carolinas, or, you know, on and on and on and on. That's just for me. That's just my take. Take that for what you will. That's just me.
Anyway, it's a good time to be a wrestling fan, whether you like national wrestling or you like independent wrestling. It's a good time to be a wrestling fan because there's a lot of it. I'm actually going to AEW Wednesday night, July 31st in Greenville, South Carolina. Second AEW show I've been to. I'm excited for that. I'm excited. Hopefully get to a show this Saturday. Fans, that's just it. If you like wrestling, go watch you some wrestling. But find these local shows. That's why we do this show, because so many people don't know about independent wrestling. So we're trying to educate the public, if you will, about the merits of independent wrestling. Don't forget, fans, if you want to get this show, if you want to get the national show early, if you want to get all the behind the scenes stuff, patreon.com/tapped-out-pod is where you can become a member. You can also become a member on YouTube, Tapped Out Pod, wherever you go. Hit that subscribe button. If you're not subscribing, then we can't be friends. So you need to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell, and then audio podcasts, get those downloads, follow our podcast, subscribe, whatever you got to do to get it. Make sure you get it. Again, a full show this week. Holy cow.
Yeah, and listen, I want us to really kind of emphasize something that we don't talk about a ton. You can become a member on YouTube for free. On YouTube and on Patreon, free membership. You don't get all the extras and stuff,
right?
But there's lots of stuff we put there that is just general public. I'm trying to get better. I know with the vacation and everything, I had slipped for a couple weeks. Philip Stamper puts out a great list of indie shows. And the reason I'm stressing is we have people that listen to this from all over the country, all over the world for that matter, but all over the country. And he puts a great list together. And I try to copy and paste it. I give him full credit for the list, by the way, but I try to put it on Patreon and I try to put it on YouTube. YouTube just a pain because it only lets you post so many characters in a post. So I have to break it up sometimes into 2 or 3 posts, which is kind of a pain. But so even if you are a YouTube member, I sometimes say like, hey, sign up for Patreon too, even if it's free, because you'll get some free stuff over there. Like the show does release on there. It just comes out at regular time if you're not, if you're not a paid member, getting it early. And
Right.
like I said, those lists and the top 5, all that kind of stuff, that stuff's free. That it just posts there. It's just a place for you to put it because I can't put it on anything audio, obviously. So
yeah. So not only is it a good time to be a wrestling fan, it's a good time to be a fan of the Tapped In Indie Wrestling Show and the Tapped Out Wrestling Show. So, hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for support, Nick. Always a pleasure to be with you, brother. So, for Nick McDaniel, this is Heath Mulligan. Thanks for listening, and we will see you at the matches.